For several decades, North Korea has been the most isolated country in the world. They basically don't let anybody in, or out for that matter. You can't cross that border, they just don't let you. For the most part anyway, but sometime in the last decade or so, they started slowly opening their borders up to a few select Western tourists who can come in and see an image of North Korea. And recently someone from Reddit did that. They saw North Korea, they explored it, and they did a Q&A AMA session on Reddit. And he basically described his experience. And what he talked about was actually kind of scary from my perspective. He largely tended to put it in a positive light. Like he said, the tour guides he was talking to seemed very patriotic and passionate about what they were talking about. He said he saw several civilians who were relatively happy and enjoyed their situation. And he was saying that it did seem kind of like a third world country, because it is, but it wasn't quite as horrible as many people depict it to be. And you gotta ask, why does North Korea open up their borders for tourists to come in? I mean, from what I understand, from what I heard people describing in their comments, it's maybe a few $1,000s to get into that trip in North Korea. But that can't be a huge financial supplement for them. And apparently they treat you very, very well. They allow you to attend a lot of shows. They give you fine food. So I can't imagine there being much of a profit for it. So it seems like it's all about image, doesn't it? Like it makes them look good. I mean, obviously, if they're so controlling of their citizens and their world, they're not going to show you the negative parts, they're going to show you the positive parts. When I hear someone who says, I went to North Korea, my first question is, did you go to North Korea or the capital of North Korea? Like Pyongyang, or however you pronounce that. Because that's not real North Korea. That's the North Korea that's made to look good. It's the part of North Korea that's meant to make it look at least semi-developed. But a lot of it is fake. There are massive buildings that are largely empty. There are people who have been pre-selected to act like they're happy. They're essentially actors to put on a show for people who come in. That's not the real North Korea. There's a documentary that's about 45 minutes long. It's in 5 different parts. I'll link it down below. It's about someone who went on a tourist trip to North Korea and his experiences he had compared to a North Korean refugee who came back and hid in a camera, and he saw different aspects of North Korea. They're talking about the tourist industry, they're talking about what they saw, and they're talking about the reality of the situation in North Korea compared to what they show you, and it's scary. It's kind of scary. They present it as some system where children are like taken as the future of the country, and we have to respect them well and give them the best. Yet if you look at what's actually going on, they don't care. I mean, the vast majority of North Korea is living in massive poverty. And even in these areas, people who have something at all just don't share it at all. You see several orphan children who are starving wandering in the streets who have nothing. And they're begging for scraps. They're digging stuff out of the mud so that they don't starve to death. Despite the fact that they do. Millions of people starve to death every year. Well, not every year, but every so often, whatever time unit they use. People starve to death in North Korea en masse. And it's funny, because we know this, it seems like common sense, but if you go and visit and you see that show, even if you know going in that it's going to be fake, you can still be persuaded. It's funny to me how often people's minds can be manipulated into perceiving something. It's like how we had the presidential debates last night, and even though a lot of people that I personally know tend to think of Mitt Romney as someone who is dishonest and who will shift his positions, in the past they've said he's not trustworthy. Upon watching the debate, they said, wow, he's very calm and collected, much more responsible than Obama, he seems more on his gun, and that was pretty impressive. Well, yeah, he's saying something good now, but what if he changes his mind in the future, which his record has kind of shown that he's prone to do. It's like people don't acknowledge the past or acknowledge what is common sense, but they go on what they're told and what seems to make sense in the moment. People don't think for themselves. It's so scary how easily people's minds are manipulated. And honestly, it kind of reminds me of what's going on in America. And I know the situation in America is not comparable to North Korea by any stretch of the imagination. North Korea is not comparable to any other place on Earth. But here in America, it's like we don't care about progress. We don't care about fixing the problems in our lives. We see the rough situation that we have, and we just act as though that's the norm. It's not perfect, but it's what we got. You know, don't bother asking for anything better. Just survive in the world that you have. We don't care about these rich people on the top who don't treat their employees fairly, they don't keep hiring, they aren't making efforts to help people, they give themselves multi-million-dollar bonuses. We don't care about government corruption, we don't care about the fact that we have two political parties that don't really represent the interests of the people and are very identical in several regards. We don't care that there are so many problems because we've just come to believe that this is the epitome of life and this is the epitome of existence, and that is a major problem. There have been people in the past in our country who have had more than we do now who still asked for more. And asking for more isn't a bad thing, because the vast majority of the time when you ask for something, you're not going to get it perfectly. If you assume that you're going to get nothing though, then you're really going to get screwed over. You have to have desire to improve, and you have to have desire to move. And people just don't have that. It's not in our nature, because people are lazy. If you believe that something is good and it's all set, then you don't have to do anything. But if there's a problem, you have to get off your ass and try and fix it, so that the problem is not there anymore and it's not destroying your life anymore. And that seems to make sense. So if you can either believe that there's a problem or there's not a problem, you're going to want to believe that there's not a problem because it makes your life easier. Sure, you're missing out on a lot of benefits, but you don't have to work towards it. You don't have to be bothered with it. And that's the problem with human nature. We don't like to be bothered with things. There are so many problems, and instead of acknowledging the problems in the world, it's so much easier to just pretend like it's not that bad. Oh, North Korea's not that bad. Sure, it's a third world nation, but they have a pretty nice fine arts program. They're treating their children somewhat fairly. The food kind of made me sick, but it was alright. I enjoyed it. It was several courses. It was enjoyable. It was an overall well experience, and I think that North Korea is not a bad place. No, it's not. It's a death camp. And if you believe otherwise, then you have a serious problem with your ability to analyze reality and make judgments about it. North Korea is not an okay place. It's probably the worst place on earth. And if a week-long experience of their brainwashing propaganda convinced you otherwise, then I don't know what to tell you. I guess you're not in a position to make judgments about anything at all in the world.